Whenever we take over a facility, a lot of you have heard me say this, we prioritize our interventions. Some of these properties are train wrecks when we buy them, right? You can't fix it all overnight, and you shouldn't try. If you do, you'll go nuts. Not only that, your pace of the turnaround will be slower. And so when I say prioritize your interventions, this means address the biggest inefficiency first. We'll use an example like my Florida property. When I bought it, they said 60% full. 20 of that 60% weren't paying and non-performing, so it was really 40% full. But I had, let's call it 40 units, 20% of the total 200 units that were filled with crap and abandoned, right? So I had I had a lot of inefficiencies at that property when I took over. Basically, all of it was inefficient. I had to pick priority number one. Priority number one for me was maximize available inventory. So those 40 units that were unrentable were dead. There was no way for me to capitalize on them, and that was the biggest inefficiency in my head. And the one, not only was it the biggest, because I think you could argue that was tied with vacancy being my other one, because I still had 40% of the facility empty that I could rent units. So one could say, well, those are both pretty big issues. Well, which one can I fix the fastest? I can get that inventory up online, at least most of it, pretty darn quick. Show up with a dumpster, a bunch of Craigslist labor, and 2 days later, 32 of those 40 units were ready and rentable, right? The other 8 had to go through auction, so it was slower. But I handled the biggest and easiest inefficiency first, and then I transitioned to, all right, now I got to fill units. What do I do to fill a unit? Well, at that case, I don't care if it's an $80 unit. If you show up and bargain with me for $60, I'm going to do it, right? Now, we know I'm not taking the calls and actually having those negotiations anymore. But I'm going to price my units accordingly, and I'm going to discount. I may compete on price, where in the long run, competing on price is not a good strategy. It's going to bring you tenants that are a headache, and they're going to give you more hassles than customers who aren't worried so much about getting the cheapest place in town. So in the long run, we never compete on price. In the short run, to handle vacancy being your biggest inefficiency, we're going to hit it. And we're going to touch on more of this later. Does that make sense, though? Yeah? Okay.